So welcome to yet another episode of our Masterclass series on emerging technology. We are discussing AI, and you've already met Stephen on our last episode. If not, you've got to check it out. We spoke about AI ops, AI cyber, and knowing Stephen always opens up questions and opens up boxes. Some of these boxes we hope to close today. We threw up a lot of topics, starting from perimeters and data points and how data needs to be secure, right up to the end where we were talking about underwriting the risk of AI. So you got to go check out that other episode. Today we want to go a little deeper into maybe the first 6 to 15 months of what organizations should be thinking of as they implement their AI ambitions. And it's going to take us into topics of infrastructure and cyber, maybe also what the CISO should be thinking of. And I want to introduce Stephen again for those who haven't met Stephen. Stephen, a good dear friend of mine who I've known in previous avatars. His latest avatar is at Zscaler. He's the global VP of media, M&A and divestitures and cyber risk. Welcome, Stephen. Always a pleasure to have you, mate.
Thank you, Prashant. We don't get connected often enough, so I appreciate the time today.
No, my God. So let me just kick off and say um, something. And this is my running hypothesis at the moment. I think as organizations start thinking about AI and Gen AI and implementing their AI ambitions, all of this has got to land somewhere. I think it needs a new landing zone. And that landing zone is not the old storage compute network um, estate they had. I think there's a brand new purpose-built estate. And that purpose-built estate, depending on what the industry is, whether it's an insurance, banking, so very information intensive, or whether it is manufacturing or consumer goods, which is asset intensive, those estates could look different. You might be dealing with real-time series data, time series of data, petabytes of data, engineering data. So maybe we're entering a world which needs net new infrastructure. So I'm hearing talk of micro data centers and nano data centers and GPUs and TPUs. Somewhere in the midst of all of this, and we are calling this cognitive infrastructure, security has to play a role. The perimeter has changed yet again. So I'd love your thoughts, Stephen, on how you do you see what I'm seeing in this cognitive infrastructure. So part A of my question and part B, hey, how should one think about weaving now cyber into all of this?
Yeah, that's a great lead in. The only buzzword I was missing was edge computing and serverless. So you've got them all, my friend.
All right.
But you know what? Because such clients you're seeing and I'm seeing, they're all confused.
Yeah.
There's so many different places. And once again, if I think about, where the world's evolved, it was a very simple world many years ago. It was just a simple mainframe and then went to distribute. And then we had data centers and co-locations and CDNs. And suddenly you don't know what's meaningful because even preempting that, we have SaaS and cloud environments. And thank gosh, we have choice and flexibility. But you brought up actually three of the most important things when we think about security. It matters where the user is. It matters where the application is. But most importantly, you need to know about the data. And if you can make sure you can provide proper policy between users, applications, and data, you can be agnostic as to where it happens to be. And as you said, that's completely transformative from what's been done for the past 20 years, where we have a castle and moat surrounding a data center. And then suddenly we moved all of our applications into your favorite hyperscaler, and we told all the employees to go home, so they're working from home. And suddenly you've got this great big data center drawing power, space, and cooling, and there's absolutely nothing of value in it. Why are you protecting a shell? So I think what you described is really the future of the entire cybersecurity industry, which is zero trust and being able to protect your most important assets, which is your data, your applications, and your users. No matter where they are, no matter what they're doing, common policies applied across the board. What do you think?
What I think this idea has power in its simplicity. I've never heard the entire topic of cybersecurity summarized on users, applications, and data. So I think the power of a great framework is always its simplicity. Stephen. And I think you nailed it with user app data. So if you can take that, and I guess you can take that framework and apply it to each industry, um, as companies are building up their AI POCs and the Gen AI POCs, and I've heard of a client who's looking at handling their contact center differently. So they're not putting the Gen AI in front of the client, but they're putting Gen AI next to the contact center to detect whether there's any emotion. And if there's emotion in the agent handling it, they ask a supervisor to step in. So you're seeing all these little Gen AI use cases sprouting like wildflowers. All of this has to land somewhere. And at some point, we're going to be coming out of POC onto something at scale.
Yeah.
And something tells me the CISO is going to be left holding that baby.
Yeah, so you've asked a lot of really great questions, and I wish we had a whiteboard together because there's so much we could draw. But let me keep it simple, and I'll stay industry agnostic because each industry has its own level of adoption of technology. Some are early, some are late, and some are yet to even adopt some of the things from years ago. So when I think about what we're doing, let's, as you said, keep it simple. You have your users, you have your apps, you have your data, and there's an attack surface. And whether they're all sitting within the same branch, campus, or data center, or they've been moved out to an edge component, a microsite, a co-location, an outsourcing arrangement, that's your attack surface. If you can understand that and you can obfuscate anything within that attack surface, whether they're connected to the core or they're sitting on the edge from home, you suddenly have an ability to apply consistent policy to ensure your governance, regulation, and controls are put into place effectively. You can track it, you have observability, you can measure it. So now that's the first thing. If you happen to have a really good perimeter, in this case, a virtualized perimeter, you can manage the attack surface and you can obfuscate everything in the middle, which makes it very difficult for someone on the outside to go internally. So let me just build upon that. Number two, if you can also make sure that when you do have folks coming in, or in this case, they already happen to be in, employee, non-employee, partner, contractor, you can manage their risk through segmentation and prevent lateral spread. Lateral spread is what gets everyone in trouble with ransomware. And by the way, we have seen AI prompt engineering create malware. So suddenly you start to see how this is all tightly coupled together. So you minimize the attack surface, you make sure you have the right controls when someone's going to internal applications, external applications, you prevent lateral spread, and now AI comes into play. The most important thing is data loss protection. These are the foundational building blocks of cyber resilience. So let's double click on what that DLP happens to mean. So let's assume you have employees working from home, working from a branch. Heaven forbid they're working from an airport terminal like you and I do all the time, and they decide to go ahead and access their favorite prompt engineering site. How do you stop it? Well, that's where I think you're going to start to see zero trust becoming so incredibly important. Not only can we start to take a look at the most common external prompt engineering sites, we can also put in place the restrictions. Do you permit? Do you deny? Do you block? Do you audit? Do you restrict? And suddenly you can start to have some additional controls, a little bit like how we've done URL filtering and making sure malicious sites aren't permitted. That's 101 stuff. Next, let's take a look at the data, because you know what? Prompt engineering sites are permitted. They're a tool that's going to enable the business, just like I jokingly said with Excel and RPA, exact same thing. So can you now allow that? But as you allow it, can you make sure that you have auditable trails so that when data is being uploaded into a public model or to an enterprise private model, you can see it, you can track it, you can report upon it, it's auditable. Now it gets to be kind of interesting. And oh, by the way, these connections aren't over open HTTP sessions. These are 443 secured sessions. So suddenly you're starting to build upon the concept you just asked me about the security piece. The transport is where you want to begin. Let's take that one step even further. What about the data? Where did it come from and where is it going? And if it was to leave the perimeter that is now a virtualized perimeter that you've protected, are you tagging it correctly? And does that match your data classification? And if by chance it does happen to have PII data or other sensitive data, obviously it's going to be blocked, or from that standpoint, alerted or reported upon. So you can start to see levels of security being applied to help make sure that we're protecting, but also enabling the business. Because the worst thing IT and cyber can do is say no. We already know what happens when it occurs.
feels almost like enterprise architecture is going to rise in importance because someone's got to talk about how is this all coming together, or how is it already put together, and feels like you need enterprise data architects also. And maybe these are the two roles which start getting more and more important because you got to know what you're protecting across users, apps, and data. And also feels like the entire threat landscape is constantly changing as we speak. And you spoke about the prompt engineering sites, etc. Are you maybe you're at Zscaler, and I know you can't reveal a few things. How is Zscaler thinking about constantly evolving cyber threats? Can you shine a light into the near future and talk about what are you guys seeing, what are you planning for, and how you're thinking about how AI tools will adapt and counteract these threats? Maybe just tell us what's coming ahead of the curve without maybe giving too much away.
No, I appreciate that question. And we have extremely strong executive leadership. We've been doing machine learning, artificial intelligence for a decade. And it's really been played out when you have billions of data points coming in. The only way to scale is to have automation, and automation with strong degree of intelligence behind it. During our customer conference just a few short months ago, made some really profound announcements around how we're helping accelerate our customers' success when it comes to utilizing our platform in AI and ML. A couple areas that really piqued the interest of our clients was risk analytics and analysis and cyber risk quantification. How do you help understand the level of risk and exposure within your environment to a user, to a segment, to a business unit, or to an entire enterprise? And once you have quantified it, can you then help denote what the level of mitigation and controls happen to address from potential financial loss? And then where do you have weakness that you have to reinvest in? Suddenly allows clients to make better educated decisions and accelerate their prioritization of the work that they do based upon data that came into the system. By the way, data is good, but let's model it and simulate it, and you can start to see what the ROI would be. Game changing. Business Insights is another environment that was announced. And how do you help take data that was once common and use it to advantages? So for example, IT asset management is one of the most important things because CMDBs never get it right. Everyone in IT knows it, which is why they spend so much darn time on IPCR and the operations group trying to connect the dots. What if you had an ability in real time to see not only how someone is doing, are they having a good day, a bad day, a good experience, a poor experience, but also what is actually sitting on their systems from software, from licenses, from processes? Suddenly the IT group becomes a proactive source of truth and a vehicle that can help make sure someone has a better experience, a more secure experience, or more importantly, just more productivity. We've also announced work that's being done on breach notification. How do you identify anomalous behavior before something goes bump in the night? And that's all based upon telemetry. When you have so much information coming in, it allows you to give more accurate insights, but more importantly, react more quickly. I think clients right now, especially in the security organizations, they're at a point of exhaustion. There's more day zero vulnerabilities than they know what to do with, and they haven't finished patching from 3 months ago. So I think they're looking for anything that can be surgical in nature to accelerate what they're going to mitigate because there's just too much coming at them. So we're using our platform and our data to help our customers have a much better experience, to take out time, cost, and most importantly, protect their brand and reputation.
I'm curious you said that because we just completed a research study, and it's just come out 2 weeks ago. And we looked at almost 25 to 30 tech vendors and their clients to see what's the enterprise side thinking about Gen AI, what are the use cases they see, and the study talks about which the industries are and which industries are showing most interest and what those use cases are. But what came out of that study was a curious set of systems. So you and I know till now we've been thinking in terms of systems of engagement and systems of record being the ERP, PLMs, etc., storing the data, the nerve center of the enterprise. And then you have the systems of engagement. And now that Apple's also and Meta has also released their headset, the number of form factors are increasing towards AR, VR. So you have the systems of engagement, increasing number of form factors, systems of record, we were wondering where AI would show up. And what's coming out is a brand new set called systems of intelligence. And these systems of intelligence are looking at action verbs, prediction, uh, judgment, um, recommendation systems, scenario building systems, everything to do with generation and recommendation to augment an employee. And then that's the first thing we saw. And they coexist with the systems of record. Systems of record don't go away. Systems of intelligence come in between and almost sit between the systems of engagement and the systems of record, bring intelligence both ways. The second thing we found was these systems are not just using data, they are potentially creating data which goes into the system. So even the way we are thinking about data sitting inside systems might change. Now we have systems creating data. So, and all of this is going to land on this infrastructure that we just spoke about. All of that will have to be potentially handled by a firm like Zscaler. It feels like the perimeter is increased. Also, what we spoke about in terms of user app and data has also exploded. It feels like a uh, feels like a good place to be in as Zscaler.
And also in the world that you're in, because you're taking something that's extremely complicated and simplifying it. So I think that's one of the biggest things, at Zscaler, or what you guys do really well at ISG. Think about what we're talking about. And once again, simple. We're detecting,
Mhm.
we're predicting, we're analyzing, and we're mitigating. That's what we do for cybersecurity when it comes to AI. You've now taken that and rationalized it at a much broader sense. Frameworks and simple things like you mentioned before to me, how do we get tactical and just do a couple of things to get our toe in the water? You phrased it eloquently. One of the bigger questions I have, who has accountability for this in an organization and
Mm.
enterprise? Think back to, some time in a large insurance firm. We had an entire business intelligence and analytics organization within each one of the three business units, as well as a centralized group in IT. Wow, that was great when you had an ability that was very centrally focused with a handful of core applications sitting in a data center. Prashant, you said something very eloquently. The deployment of these applications, you're going to see AI as a SaaS platform, and your data no longer sits within the four walls, it's sitting within a SaaS provider or a cloud environment. And that whole governance model, not the cyber piece, that'll be covered by the CISO. The data governance, the data protection, and the policies behind it, I wonder how that fits into the whole GRC organization and some of the policies they now have to update. Any thoughts?
Thoughts? I think there's a new topic coming up, and we're calling it the AI control plane. So
Mm,
the AI control plane. No, let me just take a parallel. Let me take the parallel of cloud. Imagine yourself in 2015 on cloud, and none of that, which is you can't foresee yet what has happened in 2021, 22, 23. And you're looking at cloud orchestration, and you're looking at all the things that we were handling in 2015 and 2016. Nobody knew that in 2022 your invoice would double on cloud. Nobody knew that.
yeah.
Along came the discipline called FinOps, but that came on more on the lagging end of what happened. Invoices going through the roof. Everybody was controlling unit P price. Nobody expected Q to double, though it was very intuitive. P times Q, boom, the invoice goes up. Now you can learn from hindsights and mistakes and say, hey, okay, so if I did that on cloud, what's coming up on AI? And we're thinking of three topics. The first topic, of course, is a self-financing part of AI. So it's not to go and control every single invoice on AI, but can actually AI self-finance itself? The second one is everything to do with security. So how do you do secure AI? All the things that you spoke about. The third one is the one you just brought up, and we're calling that the moral compass of the firm. So how can you see that all that you're doing in AI does not have the bias that you had not intended it to have? How can you stop hallucination? What happens when something like this affects your brand? Where is the human in the loop? Where is the human not in the loop? Where do you allow AI to decide? Very few. Where do I? Where do you allow AI to recommend? Probably more likely. is the AI in the loop at all? So, right, so think of the AI control plane in terms of self-financing, the moral compass, and
Mhm.
then secure AI. We just brought this concept out based on this study, and now we are hoping that everybody starts framing into this, developing solutions for this so that we can actually get the ball rolling. Most of our clients are very scared about getting into this because of all kinds of issues. A very curious issue, and this is going to get a chuckle out of you. Uh, we know for now that everybody is going to implement AI. We also know that in the very near future, they're going to be building and buying foundational models. There's the entire concept of transfer learning, where you buy a foundation, you feed your proprietary data, and then you own the derived work, hopefully, if you've done your licensing agreement correctly. Now, the questions they're asking is, how do we know for sure that the foundational model that you just bought has not been trained by copyrighted data? And what happens to the liability in that, right? So that's a rabbit hole on its own. We can spend an episode only on that. But you can start seeing the limits to which an AI control plane should go. I think we are now is a chance to probably learn from the last technology wave, cloud, to see whether we can not make the same mistakes on AI. And somewhere there is the cyber element, and maybe the definition of cyber and threat starts changing.
I'm so glad you're putting that framework together. So there's a common taxonomy to have a conversation because today there's too many different languages and no one can translate. So that's phenomenal. Going back to what you said, once again, if we detect, we predict, we analyze, we react. Very simple 4-step methodology. That's really hard to do though when you don't trust your data and the algorithms that are producing this. You mentioned hallucinations, data poisoning. Those are the things I think many folks are worried about because ultimately, if we're going to have not just an ability to do an automated task, but it's event driven, you're trusting your decision making on your large language model and the accuracy of how it's been learned over the past X number of cycles. And as I keep hearing from everyone, the large language models don't have enough data. Therefore, the accuracy isn't as high as it should be. How much data do you need to make a good decision is the question. So I think you mentioned it thoughtfully. There's a whole ethics piece behind it. There's trust, and there's also efficacy of the data. And we still have a lot to learn, but let's start now.
You're right. You're right. And let's keep in touch, Stephen. I think this is going to be an ever-changing landscape. Zscaler will always pave the way. We are watching Zscaler very carefully in what you guys are planning. And Stephen, you're always a pleasure to talk to, mate. Talking to you always tells me what's a little ahead of the curve. 6 to 18 months. You've always helped us shape our thoughts. Let's continue offline. And it's a pleasure to have you on this call with us and on this episode.